be right with you. Oh. Well, not as big as I thought it would be. But let's go to Matthew chapter 10 for our lesson today. And verse 1, "And when he had called unto him his 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out, and to heal all manner of sickness and all manner of disease. Now the names of the 12 apostles are these: the first, Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas and Matthew the publican, James the son of Alphaeus, and Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, Simon the Canaanite, and Judas Iscariot, who would also betray him." So here we have the original 12 disciples. Of course, there was a replacement at the end for Judas, but in Jesus' ministry, these are the 12 disciples that he chose. Now, it wasn't uncommon for a teacher, a rabbi, to go around and select students, people whom they would focus on, give their attention, to train up, to educate, to instruct. Now, you would think those kind of peoples would have a very high intelligence or a very high potential for receiving such instruction. Lawyers, doctors, even scholars. You would think those would be the ideal pits for any teacher to choose to give their time and effort into. But Jesus didn't go that way. He chose some rather odd students. So let's go to the first one. In Matthew chapter 9, Matthew writes about his own, how he became Jesus' disciple. In verse 9, "And as Jesus passed forth from thence, he saw a man named Matthew, sitting at the receipt of custom, and he saith unto him, Follow me. And he arose and followed him." Now this man, Matthew, he did not shy away from the shame of being a publican. A publican was a tax collector, probably one of the most hated people in any given city. The tax collectors were in charge of collecting the tax for the Romans. And in those days, you couldn't just go online to find out what your taxes were. You had to go to the tax collector when he arrived in your city and pay him whatever he said. If you paid less than you were supposed to, the Romans might come knocking at your door, and no one wanted that. But they knew that these tax collectors were liars, that they would often deceive them in order to pocket whatever extra money they could get. So Matthew was likely one of these hated individuals. He is probably of a reputation that people did not like him very much. And he might have even participated in some of this greedy behavior, lying, deceiving to get more money. But Jesus comes to him and invites him to join his students, to become his student and follow his instructions. Matthew has some nice prosperity, some nice money he can come into, but he gives it all up to follow Jesus. And Jesus, knowing this man is a tax collector, is one of probably the most greedy people in the city, deceitful, lying, but he chose him to join as a student, to follow him. Now let's come to another one. Let's go back to Matthew chapter 4. "And Jesus, walking by the Sea of Galilee, saw two brethren, Simon called Peter, and Andrew his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishers. And he saith unto them, Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. And they straightway left their nets and followed him. And going on from thence, he saw other two brethren, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, in a ship with Zebedee their father, mending their nets. And he called them, and they immediately left the ship and their father, and followed him." Now, fishing was not a bad job, certainly not as ill a reputation as a publican. It was actually quite prosperous, but they were not highly educated. fishermen were not seen as the great kind of fellows to be around. They might have stunk or were quite filthy, but they were not the best to go to for advice. But it was a prosperous job, something that a fisherman, someone with a secure job like this, would not want to give it up so easily, especially brothers together, and James and John with their father. This was a good position, a hard thing to give up. Yet Jesus comes, a teacher that they hardly knew, that they were seeing for the first time, and they decided to leave their nets, to leave the prosperity that they had, to go and follow him. Now, Jesus was calling them to a role that was quite different than they had already experienced. They were fishermen. They knew how to put bait on a hook, likely a worm. Today we have things that aren't food, but we can reuse. It looks pretty for fish, and so we can reuse it rather than buying more edible baits. But in that case, it is a deceit. The fish see something they liked that looked good, and they fall for the trap. They bite on the hook, and they're pulled up, and they are captured. They are taken from their freedom, from their water, into a much worse scenario. But Jesus calls them to be fishers of men, not to use lies and deceit, or to puff themselves up in some way that is false, that is not true. He calls them to draw people to God, but with a genuine example and relationship. You notice many times in the Bible, people aren't just shown all their good attributes. Many of them, many of the heroes of the Bible, the Hall of Faith, is filled with people who failed. James and John and Peter and Andrew are no exception. Peter especially, he had failures. Yet Jesus called them to follow him and to be these examples, to be people who could be front and center, the draw of people to God, to show what a genuine relationship with God is like. The joy that comes from it, that cannot be found anywhere else in this world. And not to mention the eternal rewards. So James and John, Peter, Andrew, even Matthew gave up likely a strong fortune, but they were following Jesus into something that was much better. And whatever we follow Jesus to, whatever he leads us to, it will be much better than whatever riches we can gain from this world. Let us not just be rejoice in our own eternal security with God. Let us try to share that joy, that relationship we have, that security with others. Let us draw them to God as well and be so much the better and so much the richer when we all meet each other in heaven. So I thank you for joining me today and hope that you have a wonderful rest of your Sunday. Bye.